Welcome back to The Key with Kim Mills. I'm so glad you're joining us today. And I wanted to share with you what we're going to talk about today. We are going to dive into a little bit more specifically about Columbus real estate and 5 things you should know right now about what's happening in Columbus regarding residential real estate. You know, the reality is headlines don't really give us the entire story. And Columbus, Ohio is a growing market and it is not a one-size-fits-all situation. So what I really want you to know in these 5 things today, whether you're doing that now or maybe you're thinking about it in a year or two, I think these insights hopefully will provide you with at least understanding what's happening right now so you can get prepared, because I think the best thing you can do is be armed with information so when you're ready to go, you know what to expect. So the first point, it's not just one market, it's many markets. And what do I mean by that? Well, the reality is different neighborhoods are all behaving differently. So when you hear maybe a headline all about Columbus or all about the Midwest, it's helpful, but really you have to go way more micro to understand what's really happening. So what we're seeing, I'm going to give you guys some data. The median sales price for Central Ohio in July was $342,000. But in suburbs like Dublin, Upper Arlington, Powell, New Albany, Grandview, and Bexley, it's actually $600,000 plus. Same metro area, but very different realities. So really what we have to do is help you understand how every one of those suburbs that I just mentioned, how it is behaving on its own, because they're all their own little story and they all have their own little nuances. I can tell you just with an anecdotal story, I have some people have still been experiencing multiple offer situations where it's still really competitive. And then we have other things that aren't moving very quickly. Like I said, every scenario is different. Had something recently where we were in a really competitive situation in Dublin. I think they had 4 or 5 offers. All of them were over list price, waiving contingencies, all the things. Then I also have a really adorable condo that is listed in German Village, and it's been kind of quiet. We had an open house and really only, I think, 2 people dropped by. So it's just different. And they have, I think the reasons for both of those are entirely different just based on where they're located. And we'll get a little bit more into pricing, and I'll talk about that because that is something going on with both of those homes that I just mentioned. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, the reality is inventory is climbing, and that's really actually a good thing. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you some data. Inventory in Columbus is up 20.8% year over year and 8.7% month over month. And this is the highest that our inventory has been since 2016. Meaning if you're looking in MLS, we have way more houses, condos, properties for sale than we have since 2016, which is huge. The reality, I think sometimes people panic because what does this mean? What this data means is there are 5,600 homes that are on the market in July. Okay, so 5,600 total properties in Columbus on the market in July. If you go back to, say, pandemic times, 2020, 2021, there may have been 1,900 homes on the market, which was bonkers. And that's why things were obviously going really quickly for crazy amounts of prices. It was demand, right? Now, when I say 5,600, to put that all in perspective, it definitely is a market that's still skewing towards the seller because we still don't have, even though that inventory is higher, it's still not what we would say a balanced market, but it is evening out a little bit. And so really, honestly, that is a good thing. Some of the things why I think this is a good thing, buyers having choices. Personally, I feel like this can allow buyers to really get excited about the house, stay in contract on the house, not terminate because they have buyer's remorse or feel like we didn't really think about this. We were just getting competitive and we wanted to win. And we don't really think this is actually the right property for us, which happened, honestly, it happened a lot when we were just running at a crazy pace. Buyers weren't able to really sit and think is this the right move for us? And now you have that a little bit of time, which is good. An anecdotal story I want to share with you related to inventory climbing. I had clients that recently were actually about to close on the property that they're in contract on, but we circled around a few properties. Some of them went quickly, some of them didn't. And I am always of the mindset that when it works out, when you get into contract and you close, that really is the house that you're supposed to be in. You can experience a lot of disappointment getting to that end goal. But what happened with us, they fell in love with this one property online. we walked through the home, and I think they really wanted to love it. They started kind of convincing themselves that this was the right place. And long story short, we were not the best offer, and so they did not choose us. We circled back to some properties that we had seen 7 days before, which if this were happening 2 or 3 years ago, those houses that we saw 7 days before probably were not still on the market. They were also in contract. So what was great is they were able to really think through what is important to us. Have we seen anything that like checked a lot of those boxes? And we actually had. So we went back to this house. It was still available. They were ready to pull the trigger because they obviously have been prepared, and they're super excited. So it's interesting how it all works out. But what I would say is having the moment to think about the decision itself and not just playing in a competitive race, it's really actually helpful for sellers and buyers. All right, third thing, longer days on market does not mean something's wrong. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you've bought a house recently or you're currently looking, you know that days on market is something that gets discussed. When we were in this crazy frenzy a few years ago, things were naturally selling, I would say, within the first 1 to 4 days on the market, meaning it would hit on a weekend, it would go into contract on that weekend, and it was then unavailable. Right now, what we're seeing is the days on market is growing to a little bit longer duration, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with the house. I think what you're seeing is what I just alluded to before, is there's just more choices, and so buyers are actually able to take a minute and think. And like I said, I think this is actually a good thing because once you're in contract, I feel like people are way more invested in the right decision for them instead of just feeling like they're playing the game. From a data standpoint, for days on market, homes right now are averaging 27 days on market. Compared to just a year ago, it was 22 days on market. So it doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but 5 days in 1 year, you can feel it. I think consumers can start to feel it. And I think some people immediately think, should I be worried about this? My personal opinion is no, you shouldn't be worried about this. I actually think it can actually help you in the long run if you're a buyer. Let me share a little bit of a story about some days on market. So I took over a property. I was the second agent in. And when I was doing my research, this one condo that I was listing had been on the market for 198 days. And that's a long time. So I was really trying to dissect what had happened in those 198 days. When I really peeled back what was going on and did a lot of research on pricing and looking at the competitive analysis of what had sold, what I realized is the story was nothing to be scared of. They had just not maybe aligned with the best strategy for this property. So if your strategy is right and you can really work on what the right price is, it's going to sell, and likely it will sell in under 198 days. This particular situation, we got it into contract in 4 days, which was amazing. Obviously, the sellers were really happy, but the buyer was excited as well because, again, I think we were priced at the right number. So it went quickly, which was good. All right, the fourth thing, buyers actually have space to negotiate again. You know, it started to feel, if you think about a pendulum, it really started to feel out of whack where the sellers were holding the entire, that they held everything. They had the basket with all the goods. And as a buyer, you just had to say, okay. And, you know, that doesn't always feel great when you're a buyer. You're bringing all the money to the table to make the deal happen, and it still felt like it wasn't enough. We kind of joked when the market was so crazy, you felt like you might even have to write like your firstborn into an offer just for it to be taken seriously. So it is refreshing that we kind of can take a little bit of a step back from that and negotiate again, meaning there are different contingencies that you're going to have in any offer. It could involve the inspection. It could involve the appraisal. Those are moments where historically we've always been able, it's another point of negotiation in the contract and in your journey on going from beginning to close. So the reality is inspections right now, you can use that as a negotiation point. Appraisal is kind of the same thing. I haven't seen as many appraisal issues, but I will say on the inspection front, I have definitely seen requests to remedies and buyers asking sellers to fix some things if they're broken. And it is agreed upon from the seller, and it gets us to the closing table. So being able to negotiate again feels good, I think, for all parties in the sense that it's fair. And I think, you know, it doesn't feel like you just had to grab at all the strings to hang on. You're literally meeting in the middle, which always feels good when you get to the end of that at the closing. All right, here's the fifth one. Strategy. Strategy is one of my favorite words. Strategy is the real game changer of what you're going to see in the Columbus real estate market right now. I feel like a phrase that we use, and maybe it's a little bit more of our inside jargon, but there is a shifting market. And so what we see is that it's really your price and the market that matters the most. So when I'm talking to clients, a lot of times you'll see a price, but you need to peel it back a little bit and really understand condition and any other factor that might have made that property sell really quickly or maybe sit. Just some examples. If something sat for a while, even though we felt like it was priced right, maybe you have to look, was it in a busy road? Did it back up to a railroad track or something like that? There are always nuances. So you got to dive in deeper to create that right strategy. From a data perspective, the inventory and days of market, they are increasing. But for sellers, I think the accurate pricing right now matters more than ever. I feel like we all were taught as kids that you negotiate. I mean, I remember my dad always telling me, there's always room to negotiate. What's funny in Columbus, I feel like we kind of have a polite market that if something feels like it is listed too high, I've had situations where buyers won't even submit an offer because they feel like they might offend the seller. Where a seller is coming at it saying, I wish somebody would just send us an offer because we'll work with it. It's an interesting situation that we have in Columbus. So the pricing, I feel like if you can be a little bit more aggressive on the pricing, and it doesn't mean that you're leaving money on the table. I think you're being smart with what the price really is. That is going to benefit you as a seller. But I also think as a buyer, the second you see that, you know whether you need to act on this quickly or if you have a little bit of time. A little story to share with you on that one. The difference between, let's say, no showings on a property and multiple offers, it really isn't luck. I just had this happen where I had buyers and we weren't the winning offer. We wrote a really, really strong competitive offer. When we walked through the house, I knew immediately it was going to go above list price, and I missed what the actual price was. In my mind, I said, I think this is going to go for X, and it was $5,000 off of what the offer was that they selected. That comes from experience. It comes from knowing different nuances in different suburbs. And I think my clients, really what happened with that is I gained a lot of trust with them because they knew. They said, okay, Kim really knows what this number is. But the reality is every situation and every suburb is a little bit different. But I'm telling you, if it is in good condition, if it's updated, and if it's styled right, it likely is going to end up in more of what I would say a multiple offer situation versus something that might be getting few showings. Maybe the photos maybe they're just not very good. Maybe we could do some staging or virtual staging. There's different things, but I think the first thing that most people are going to look at are those photos. So you got to nail those. So like I said, the difference between no showings and multiple offers, it isn't luck. It's really how we position through pricing, through the staging, and then also through marketing. All right, so those are our 5 things that you need to know about the Columbus real estate market right now. Just a quick recap. I think the inventory, so everybody knows, at a decade high, median prices, they are still up. We're up 4.6%. Days on market are up a little bit. And that, like I said, is not a bad thing. Columbus is still a seller-leaning market, meaning we have 2.3 months supply versus 5 to 6 months supply, which would mean a more even market for a balance. So just keep in mind, it's not a one size fits all. National headlines don't always come down to what is happening in our specific neighborhoods. And if you're curious at all about what these shifts might mean for you, then we should talk. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please keep in mind, new episodes drop every Tuesday. And do me a favor, subscribe and share this with a friend so you don't miss the next conversation. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and this is just the start. I can't wait to unlock more stories and insights with you.